I'm Megan. I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I'm here today to share my thoughts on the brand new Love Notions pattern, the Fraser Cardigan. I was one of the testers for this brand new pattern that's releasing on January 24th from Love Notions, and it is the Fraser Cardigan, and it is a gorgeous cocoon style cardigan with two different views, one that has a hood and one that doesn't. I've made the one without the hood. It has these amazing and deep pockets, and it's quite long, covers the bum, and I didn't add any length to mine. So typically with Love Notions patterns, they're drafted for a height of 5'5", and I'm 5'9", but I didn't think I needed to add any length to this one, and I still think it covers my rear end the way that I'd like it to be covered. It is a cozy, delightful cardigan for cooler weather, or if you just want to snuggle up and be comfortable. I made mine out of a 4-way stretch waffle knit fabric from Black Rabbit Fabrics in British Columbia, here in Canada. I also used a coordinating cotton lycra stretch for the bands and the cuffs of my cardigan, and I definitely would recommend that you do the same. Later in this video, I'll be sharing a few tips for sewing with waffle knits because it definitely has a bit of a learning curve. Speaking of a curve, the bands on this cardigan are curved, so the cocoon style does hug, sort of your lower half of your body a little bit, which is very on trend, I'd say. This is a very popular style. I've made other cocoon cardigan patterns, but I've never made one that has bands that actually have that curved shape. They're like a J, and so when you sew all of the bands together, you make like an egg-shaped oval and then attach it to the sweater. And they sit so nicely. They don't bunch, they sit flat because you're sewing a curved edge onto a curved edge. You get a really nice finish. And I know that Tammy and her team at Love Notions worked really hard to make sure that the bands were cut with the right amount of negative ease so that they didn't ruffle or ripple. So like I said, I made mine out of a 4-way stretch waffle knit fabric, which is super trendy right now, at least in the knit fabric stores that I shop in. Everybody's carrying waffle. All of the stores are selling like waffle knit lounge sets. I thought that this periwinkle color was really pretty and is different from the grays and blacks that I find myself wearing day in and day out. And so I thought, why not give it a try? It could look a little bit bathrobe-y, like it's one of those spa colors, but it is very comfortable. The one pattern adjustment that I did make on top of grading between sizes, which I always do, and I guess it's a pattern alteration or adjustment, but I typically don't count it. But I did my very first full bicep adjustment on this pattern, and it worked super well. So I made an extra large graded to a 3XL, but my bicep is larger than the extra large body measurement on the Love Notions pattern block. So I wanted to give myself a little bit of extra room because I didn't want this to be tight fitting, and I have noticed lately that more of the garments that I'm making, if I make this smaller to accommodate my upper bust, in the Love Notions patterns I could use a little bit more room in the bicep. So I added an inch to the bicep. I followed the instructions on the Love Notions blog, but I really recently noticed that Alex, another YouTuber, has a great tutorial, so I will link her tutorial down below in the description box so you can check it out. But it was not hard because I only added an inch. I didn't need to redraft the sleeve cap, like the curve on the top of the sleeve for the sleeve head. It worked really well, and I find it has made a huge difference. I wanted this to be big enough that I could wear a light long sleeve t-shirt or sweater underneath it and not feel like it's bunching. Right now I just have a camisole on underneath it, and it is, it's loose, but that is how I wanted it to look. If I made this again, the other thing that I would do is I find that the sleeves are a little bit longer than I like, and because they have a cuff on them, the cuff is snug. I would make the cuff, I think I would cut about an inch off the sleeve, and I might make the cuff a little bit shorter and a little bit wider so that I wear all of my sweaters pulled up like halfway up my arm because I'm constantly washing my hands. I have small children and kids are messy and I am messy. So I'm always washing my hands. I'm trying to pull up my sleeves and I just prefer that. That's how I always end up with all of my shirt sleeves. So with the snugger cuff, I find that's a little bit harder to do. So I also have some more of this cotton lycra and I might just cut them off and make a new cuff. But we'll see. All in all, I thought that this pattern It is a great classic cardigan. It's perfect for, basically it's a 4-season garment, but especially if you live in the Northern Hemisphere like I do and it's cold, this is a nice one to cozy up in. I will say that these massive pockets, I walked out wearing this cardigan the night that I made it, and my husband looks at me and he's like, you could fit a family-sized bag of chips in those pockets. And so we tested it, and you can indeed fit a whole family size, that's the big ones, like maybe not the Costco size bag of chips, but a big bag of chips into this pocket. So if you're in a place in your life where you're like, you know what I really need is I need somewhere that I can hands-free my potato chips while I read my novel or do whatever it is you do to relax, this might be the garment for you. One thing I do know has changed since I made this version of the pattern, which was almost the last version, is the pocket band has been lengthened slightly. Mine is just a little bit too short. It's just got too much negative ease on that pocket. It draws it in and gives it almost like a gathered look, which I think is actually quite cute. But because it's pulling, when I sewed my bands on, it does pull here, the fabric. So I believe that the designer made an adjustment to that, and that's been corrected for the final version of the pattern, but I don't mind. I still am quite happy with this garment. So I wanted to share a few tips for sewing with waffle knit in case you really like the look of this garment and you want to give it a try. Waffle knit is cozy and comfortable, and like I said, it's very trendy right now, but it has very poor recovery for a stretch knit fabric. What that means is when you stretch it, it does not snap back into place. Basically, when I stretch this, a swatch of this fabric, it just sort of hangs. It doesn't go back to the original shape. So it's not great for things like cuffs, neck bands, bindings, pocket bands, and the big curved band that's on this garment. So I would definitely recommend that you use a different type of fabric for the cuffs and the bands on this if you're going to make this with a waffle knit. I used, like I said, coordinating cotton lycra, worked perfectly. Something else to keep in mind with this fabric that has such poor recovery is that if you stretch it out while you're sewing, it's going to look pretty bad. So you want to be sure that when you're sewing it together, you're very careful. You could use your walking foot. I didn't use my walking foot on my machine because I wanted to see if a couple of the other adjustments that I would make a difference. I was very careful when I was pinning that I was not stretching the waffle knit as I pinned the bands and the cuffs on. I was super careful. I didn't stay stitch any of it, but if you were really worried, I think you could use a long basting stitch and stay stitch the curves. I am worried that the pockets will stretch out. So as much as I could put a giant bag of chips in them, I probably won't. Even the weight of my phone in them kind of drags the pocket down. I think once I wash it and dry it, it will sort of, shrink back into shape a little bit, but definitely something to keep in mind. The other thing was I adjusted the stitches that I used on my sewing machine. So I put this entirely together with my sewing machine, not my serger, because I had heard that serging with waffle knit can be a bit challenging, and I was not up for the challenge the day that I made this garment. I might give it another go. I still have lots of it left, and so I might make a pullover for one of my kids. But for the purposes of this garment, I used my sewing machine for the entire thing. I lowered the pressure on my pressure foot all the way down. So I think mine is a 1 to 4 scale, 1 being the lowest. I had it on a 1. So the foot pressure was all the way down. I also increased my stitch length just a little bit to avoid that seam ripple, and it made a big difference. So I did some test stitches before I started sewing the garment together to see if I could minimize that amount of ripple that I was getting. This does press beautifully. So if I did have any rippling in the seams, I knew I could press it out. And I did that with basically all of the seams. It's got a center seam down the back, and I wanted to make sure that was hanging nicely and neatly and not wavy. I was also very careful when I stitched the bands on. So just to be sure that I wasn't shifting things around, that I wasn't using too much pressure, that I wasn't pulling on things. And I used a ton of pins, especially on the curves. So not so much on the straight on the front, but on the curves on the side and the back and the curves around the neckline, I used a ton of pins. I often use lots of clips, but if I'm going to clip a neckband on, I'll probably put, I'll clip the quarter points and then I might do the other ones. But this I probably used, 48 pins or clips to clip just the bottom curve of this. I was very careful because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to shift and stretch out, and I also didn't want to have to rip my stitches out because I didn't think, it's kind of a loose weave. I was worried it would fray if I had to get in there with my stitch ripper too much. So those are my tips for sewing with waffle knit. Make sure you pre-wash it and pre-shrink it. So wash it on as warm water as you're comfortable with and high heat in the dryer if you're comfortable with that. Especially the stuff from Black Rabbit held up beautifully in the washer and dryer. It is nice and soft, and I imagine that with time it will get even softer. But yeah, I'm very happy with my Fraser cardigan. I hope you give it a try. I've got a link in the description box. It is an affiliate link, so I'd get a small commission if you use it. But anyway, I hope that you have a great day, and I will see you again soon.